Good evening. I'm Stasha Brandon, the Literature and Humanities Program Manager at the Seattle Public Library. And as we begin tonight, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land. Here in Seattle, these are the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish people. We honor their elders past and present and thank them for the stewardship of this land. Welcome to the final program in the five-part series, Radical Self-Acceptance as Activism, curated by Olaya Land and presented in partnership with Third Place Books. We're grateful to our author series sponsor, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation, and the Seattle Times for generous support of library programs. Thank you as well to the Seattle Public Library Foundation. Private gifts to the foundation from thousands of donors help the library provide free programs and services that touch the lives of everyone in our community. I have a couple quick announcements before we get started. We have closed captioning for this event, and you can access the closed captioning by clicking on the closed caption icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And after Olaya and Evian are done chatting, we'll have time for questions from you. You can ask your questions at any time during the program by writing them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And finally, after the program, we are interested in hearing from you. We'll post a link to a program survey in the chat. I'll probably wait till we're a little bit closer to the end of the program. And we would appreciate it if you took a minute after the event to fill it out. We would just love to hear what you think. Now I am delighted to introduce tonight's speakers. Olaya Land is the founder and editor of Lioness, an online journal and community promoting connection, confidence, sisterhood, and self-love. Olaya is the host of the Lioness podcast as well and leads retreats and workshops all over the world that help people feel empowered and connect to their creativity. I've been a huge fan of Olaya's work for years now and was so excited when she agreed to be a guest curator for us. And we have just had an amazing series with Olaya this fall, and it's been just so life affirming, and I've learned so much, and I hope that you've all been able to join us for those. If not, I'll be posting a link a little bit later on where you can watch some of the earlier talks if you missed those. For tonight's event, Olaya will speak with Evian Whitney. Whitney is a sexuality doula, sex educator, and sensualist. Since 2011, Evian has been dedicated to sex education and sexual activism for women and non-binary folks, helping individuals reclaim their unique sexual expressions and reconnect to their sensual bodies. Evian's work focuses on decolonizing, unshaming, and liberating sexuality at the intersection of identity, pleasure, and embodiment. Evian is the author of the just published Sensual Self, a self-guided journal that will help you come home to yourself through your senses. They also host a podcast of the same name. For more about her work, go to evianwhitney.com and you can follow them on Instagram at evianwhitney. And I'll go ahead and post those in the chat as well in just a minute. So please give a virtual hand for Evian Whitney. But first, let's welcome Olaya Land to our digital stage.
Hello.
Hey.
Thanks, Tasha. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am so thrilled to be here doing this final talk in this series on radical self-acceptance as activism. And before I dive into my conversation with Evian, I just want to give a little backstory on what this talk series is about, how I got the idea, my intentions behind it. So first of all, I was thrilled when Stasha approached me about working with the library. I love our Seattle Public Library. I feel like during the pandemic and beyond, our library system has been just an absolute lifesaver. And I am honored and thrilled to be working with them on this talk series. So the idea for this series came to me. I was kind of like looking around. I was given carte blanche to host a talk series about anything I wanted. And I kind of looked around, and as I'm sure most of you know, the past couple of years have been rough for all of us. That I think there's been a combination of factors. First of all, that we've seen that life is precious and unpredictable. I think that's really hit home in a way that many of us didn't feel prior to the pandemic. I also think many of us were deeply marked by the violence carried out against people of color, especially in the past couple of years, and the political schism that we've had in this country. And then finally, and more recently, I've been looking around and seeing burnout at just like acute levels, like I've never seen it before. So I was impacted by the work of Adrienne Marie Brown, particularly their work, Pleasure Activism. If you haven't read that, highly, highly, highly recommend it. Fantastic work. And also by Tricia Hersey at the Nap Ministry, who really, these two authors and activists exposed me to the idea that rest and pleasure and self-acceptance and coming home to yourself, in addition to being healing, could also be a form of activism. So that is the idea behind these talks. And my hope was to explore what radical self-acceptance can look like, especially for marginalized communities, and also how we can use radical self-acceptance and meaningful self-care to combat burnout, lead more fulfilling lives, and show up more fully for ourselves, our families, our communities, and the world. So that said, I want to go ahead and introduce Ev'Yan Whitney. Welcome, Ev'Yan.
Hi, so happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Yes, I'm so thrilled to get to speak to you, to get to hear about your work. I found you either through Jacqueline Friedman or Anne Nguyen, I'm not sure, but somebody turned me onto your podcast and I have been listening for quite a while. For those of you not familiar with Ev'Yan and their work, definitely recommend their podcast called The Sensual Self. I can't remember how I found you, but your work has been really instrumental in kind of helping me rethink my relationship to my body, to sexuality, to pleasure. So thank you for all of the work that you do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for supporting me and my work. It means a lot.
Yeah, and I haven't had a chance to hold a physical copy of the book. I ordered it and it's coming. It will be here this weekend, but I had a PDF copy to prepare for this talk. And I have to say, I love it.
Oh, thank you.
We're going to get a little bit more into the book and the format, but I'm definitely going to use that as my new morning ritual. Like right now I do have a journaling practice, but when my book arrives, I'm going to start using it. It's really fantastic. Okay, I'll stop gushing. Let's get into it. So I always like to start all of these talks by asking my guest to tell us a little bit about their story, about their path. And today I would like to read, with your permission, a short quote from your website. And then if you could elaborate on that a little bit. So you write on your website, I entered this work of sexual healing and liberation from a selfish place. I wanted to better understand my sexuality and sensuality after years of being taught that ownership of those things were off limits to me, that my body was a site of temptation to myself and others, that the voice of my desires shouldn't be trusted, and that I wasn't allowed to claim my wants because of the rigidity of respectability. So I feel like this quote just resonates with so many of us, especially those of us in female presenting bodies. And I would just love if you could talk a little bit about how this unfolded. I know you come from a conservative family. So how did you get on this path? How did you come to writing the book? How did you come to doing the work that you do? Tell us everything.
Yeah, I like to tell people that I really stumbled into this work. I didn't choose, wake up one day and say like, I want to be a sexuality doula and I want to do sex education. It really came from a place of wanting to understand my own sexual hangups and disconnection. And that was first and foremost the primary goal for me. I really wanted to figure my issues out and get to the bottom of what was keeping me from being connected to my body, keeping me from feeling like I was worthy of being intimate with other people, that I was worthy of the pleasure that is my birthright. And, as I started very publicly talking about this journey that I was going through and just having a lot of curiosity about my own process and the healing that needed to be done, folks were paying attention. I was publicly blogging about it. And I think that really helped to make folks feel that they weren't alone in their own struggles. Because when I first got started, I thought that I was an outlier. Like everyone else was having the best sex ever. Everyone was feeling super confident and good in their bodies. And I was just the weirdo, the late bloomer that was in my early 20s and I still was having issues being intimate with others and with myself. And as I started talking about this more publicly on my blog at the time, I was getting a lot of folks saying thank you so much for talking about this. Literally no one in my circle talks about these issues. Everything is so sexualized and I feel like I have to be someone I'm sexually not. I kept getting messages like that. And I also kept getting questions from people asking me when I was going to teach workshops and essentially help guide them on their journeys. And To make a long story short, I decided to go with it and begin to hold space for women, femmes, and non-binary folks to help them birth their own sexual liberation journeys, whatever that looks like to them. And yeah, I've been doing this for almost 11 years. It'll be 11 years in February. So it's my career now. It's what I do.
That's awesome. And I know you did something very cool. You did this sensual selfie challenge. Can you tell us a little bit
Yes.
about that?
My heart will always be so fond of that particular project. I believe I had the first challenge in 2018. And that challenge was really a call to action for folks to take photos of themselves of a celebratory and embodied nature, where they were taking selfies that were celebrating their softness, their sensuality, their sexuality in some cases, and posting them on Instagram. And this was back in the day when we were allowed to do such things. And it was such a beautiful experience. I mean, I still get people. Actually, I was at a event the other day for a book signing, and someone walked up to me and said, like, your sensual selfie challenge changed my life. Like, it really helped me to see my body and my sexuality and my sensuality and my melanin in like a different way. And I will always have such a fondness in my heart for that project, because for me it was, I just want for, in everything that I do, my work is so much about wanting to empower people to be the expert and I guess it is the expert, like the expert of their own experience, the expert of their own sexuality, and to feel a sense of like ownership with that they don't have to ask for permission or try to seek it from someone else. And yeah, I think that the sensual selfie challenge was a glimpse for some folks into their own innate power and sensuality.
Yes, and it's so powerful. I wasn't following you at the time that you did the challenge, but I read about it and I did my own like impromptu sensual selfie challenge last year. I took pictures of
Nice.
myself and my body like almost every day for a year, just for me. Like, I didn't post them anywhere. And that is just, it's transformational.
It's
Just
powerful.
to like do for you, like to take back the gaze, like to let you look at yourself, to let you, normally we're used to creating these images for public consumption. And there's
Right.
something so powerful about like doing that in a space of having a greater relationship with yourself. So
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the driving force for this challenge was to really disrupt this idea that our sexuality, our sensuality, particularly as women and like femme presenting people, needs to be sort of validated or affirmed by somebody else, especially the male gaze. And so I grew up in purity culture that taught me that, in not so many words, you know, my sexuality didn't belong to me, and that I was sort of handing over any sort of sexual autonomy that I had over to my soon to be husband, who would unlock my lust and my passion and my orgasm, which was such, I mean, it's ridiculous to think about now, but I really wanted to do this challenge as a way to say, like, I'm a sexual being, I'm a sensual being all on my own. I don't need a man or a lover or even to be in a sexual context for that to be affirmed or celebrated. And yeah, I love that other people got a glimpse of that within themselves too.
yes, so powerful. I love it. I would love to talk a little bit now about sensuality, sexuality, pleasure, but especially sensuality, that being the theme of your new book.
Yes.
I feel like sensuality and sexuality, especially in America, get conflated a lot. So can you tell us what sensuality is for you and kind of the basic difference? What's the difference between sensuality and sexuality?
Yeah, you're not the only one that has noticed the conflation of sensuality and sexuality. As a sex educator, I see a lot of my colleagues using sensuality interchangeably with sexuality, which I don't think is necessarily wrong. But my hope through this book and through the work that I'm doing is to give a little bit more depth and substance to what sensuality is, outside of the sexual context and the sexualized image that we have. So for me, sensuality is about being with your body. It's about a private personal experience that you have both internally and also through your senses externally, that gives you information and connection and a sense of groundedness and embodiment. within your own experience. And I think that there's a lot of overlap with sensuality into sexuality. One of the things that I say a lot in my work is that we can't have the best, most pleasurable sex of our lives without being in our bodies and in our sensuality. But one of the things that has sort of brought me to this understanding of sensuality is, when I was in this period of confusion around my sexuality, sex and even just saying the word or thinking about doing it was just so charged for me. I'd been sexually traumatized, and living in purity culture gave me all kinds of trauma as well. So sex just felt really heavy. But sensuality, even though it came with some connotations and some problematic images for me, it wasn't as heavy or charged. And so I noticed that it was easier for me to begin this journey of sexual reclamation through thinking about my sensuality, and specifically my sensuality outside of the context of sex. And so I have created for myself like a container and a space where I allow myself to just be in my own body, be in my own senses, and to also explore the pleasure of that experience. I think a lot of us have this mentality or this belief that we are only allowed to experience a full range and depth of pleasure when we're having sex with someone. Even that word pleasure it can be very sexualized. I know a lot of whenever I'm teaching workshops, I have to give like this precursor, like pleasure. When I say pleasure here, I'm not just talking about sex. And so like I'm really interested in having people be curious about their pleasure potential outside of a sexual context, and to really see their entire bodies as a pleasure center. And I guess the way that that's different from sexuality is that sexuality to me is about sex. It's about your sexual energy. It's about it's about who you have sex with, who you want to have sex with. Whereas sensuality is an experience I feel that is personal. It's not for somebody else's gaze. I think that's sort of the discerning factor for me.
Yes, and that is why I think that it is so radical to have these practices of connecting with sensuality, because we receive so many messages. Like we're just bombarded with messages about how our bodies, our sensuality, the way we present is not for us. So this act of like being in communion with that in a way that's just for us, I think is really powerful and is really radical. I love it.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about, I just want to share one thing from the book just for everybody watching. You said, and this resonated with me so much, I thought, it's such a good definition. You said that sensuality is like paying attention with your senses.
Yes.
And I thought, that's so good, because we're so mired and like we're on our phones and we just have stimuli like 24/7 coming at us. So this like, like setting that aside and just paying attention, like, how does this taste? How does this clothing feel? What does the air feel like on my skin? Like there's no time for that in our days.
Yeah.
So I love that definition.
Yeah, sensuality to me is not a one-time experience. It's a practice that we have to cultivate. It's a lifestyle that we have to actively choose each day. Because I believe that if you have a body, you are a sensual being. And our job is essentially to make time, to carve out time for us to get connected to those parts of ourselves. And you're right, we don't live in a very sensual world, or at least we live in a world that is constantly trying to get us to go super fast and do a lot of things. There's not a lot of time for being, and the way that I like to think about it is sensuality. The only way that we can access our sensuality is by slowing down. And I know that there have been people, all of us have probably had an experience where we've been so in our bodies or so in our pleasure or so in the moment, either by ourselves or with nature or with somebody else, that every part of us just feels alive and buzzing. And there's a sense of contentment, there's a sense of being grounded. And that, to me, that is exactly what it means to be in our sensual selves. It's that aliveness that we're constantly searching for. And I think the other piece of this that is really important too, because sensuality, yes, is about paying attention with your senses, but I also want to hold space for the fact that our bodies have a lot of information that they're constantly trying to tell us. And we have whole emotional bodies that also is involved in honoring our sensual selves. So even when I'm, in these workshops, I'm asking for people, like, after they go through each of their senses, I'm like, okay, what's happening emotionally with you? Like, what emotions are coming up for you in this moment? And can you identify them or experience them without making any meaning? So for me, sensuality is a practice of just holding space for the total experience of your body and yourself, and to not have any judgment about what's coming up, but just to allow yourself to feel into that experience, and maybe, invite some arousal of the senses in your everyday life as well.
Yeah, and that what you just described for me, that like integration of like our emotional bodies, our physical bodies, our logical minds, I feel like is the way forward. And
Mm.
it reminds me of a quote I was going to share later, but I'll share it now. You talk about, we live in a culture that values fast over slow, logic over feeling, rigidity over fluidity, mind over body. And I read that, I was like, oh yes, this is like so, so, so.
Mhm.
And to me, this is like the stereotypically masculine, patriarchal, like colonial, capitalist method of
Yes.
working, that I think so many of us are discovering that this does not work. Like this is treating human beings like a commodity. This is not honoring our human nature. And I think we're
Uh-huh.
really feeling after, especially after these past 2 years, like how absolutely necessary that is.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
love, no, go
Oh,
ahead.
I was just going to say, our bodies are not machines. I think a lot of us treat our bodies like machines, and we sort of only pay attention to them when there's something misfiring about them. Through the practice of sensuality, I've been able to really feel into the soft animal that is my body, and to pay attention to my body, pay attention to the emotions that are coming up in my body, the sensations that are coming up in my body, that are incredible information for me. And yeah, we do live in a world that doesn't really encourage us to take that time to slow down. And if anything, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot as I've been on these book tours and writing this book, and is that, like, I feel like to a certain degree, sensuality has been co-opted by capitalism. This idea that we are not sensual on our own. We have to buy something, or we have to consume something, or wear something, or be someplace in order to experience that sensuality. And I think that it's true that there are certain atmospheres or certain articles of clothing or adornments that can enhance that feeling of body connection and confidence and security within ourselves. But what I hope that folks will be able to see through this book is that sensuality is available to them at any time, that they don't have to buy something. They don't have to fall into this trap of, like, I can only be sensual if I buy myself a bouquet of flowers. Like, you can be sensual you are sensual right now in this moment. And I think the best way to enact that for us, I mean, there's so many different ways, but it's like really just sitting and being with your body. And that's hard to do, in a world that tells us to not, and that's why I feel sensuality in this, as a practice like this, is a radical act.
Yes, totally. And that is why I'm super psyched to be talking with you and sharing your message. I'm just like, I really feel like is the missing ingredient from so many of our lives, at least here in the US,
Yes.
and many industrialized countries. Like, it's exactly like what you said, like treating ourselves like machines instead of human beings. And I feel like pleasure is the way to balance, but I find people have so much resistance, especially
Hmm.
generalizing, but especially women, are socialized to believe that, oh, I don't deserve that, or I have to serve everybody else before I can like care for myself, which of course then there's no time or energy left. Why do you think people have so much resistance to this message of like being in the body, slowing down, engaging with pleasure?
Oh, because it's hard. I mean, one of the things that comes up for me around this work, just in a personal way, is that, sometimes when we're sitting with our bodies, it can be uncomfortable to be in our bodies. I mean, we can experience pain. We can come face to face with unresolved traumas. We can come face to face with emotions that are undesirable to us. And so I think a lot of us are trying to run away from ourselves. We're trying to be out of union with ourselves because it's easier to just go and escape into something else than it is to actually sit and really take stock of what's happening. within us. And that's what sensuality is about. That's what pleasure is about. You know, one thing that I say a lot in my work is that sensuality is not just about like bubble baths and rose petals and yummy teas. Like sometimes sensuality is about sitting with grief, and it's about sitting with disappointment, and it's about sitting with the tension in your neck that just won't go away. And it's not about trying to judge it or to shift it or to change it. It's more so about like, can I honor myself in this moment? Like, can I be in the experience that I'm having? Can I be in these sensations that I'm having? And can I accept them, or at least just allow them to be there and be fully present to them, knowing that like, you know, it'll pass. We're transient, we're always changing, and there's always going to be a new sensation to come through. So yeah, I think folks are hesitant to do this kind of work because they're afraid of what might be seen. They're afraid of maybe letting people down. And also, you know, there's a standard narrative of like, be productive, and pleasure isn't productive, right? Like sitting in a bath is not, it's not furthering production in some way. So I think that, and again, that's why I keep coming back to sensuality and pleasure is a radical act. It's an act of resistance, because it's saying like, I don't have to produce, I don't have to be useful, I don't have to do all of the things in order to be someone who is worthy of experiencing pleasure. I can do that right now because that is my birthright. That's what I'm supposed to experience.
Yes, we could stop this talk right here, and I feel like that would be like a valuable message. And for everyone watching, and especially if you could drop a link for this maybe into the chat. The first talk in this series is with Dr. Devin Price, all about like resisting the laziness lie and the fact that our worth is not tied to our productivity. So I love that you called that out.
Mm-hmm.
I would love now to talk about your book. So
yes.
Like I said, I don't have a physical copy. So can you show everybody your beautiful book?
I do. Here's my book.
Awesome.
Hopefully you can see that.
Yes.
Yeah.
The illustrations are stunning. So beautiful. Who's the illustrator again?
They are French. I don't speak French, so I will not butcher their name, but I can put them in the chat actually. I think that's them. Yeah. I just want to shout out my publisher, Clarkson Potter, Penguin Random House. They literally gave me full license to really do whatever I want with this book. And I was able to select the images that I wanted in this book, because it was really important to me that for a book about sensuality, that it didn't feel boxed in, that it felt that there was movement, and also that there was representation, you know. And so a lot of the images that you'll see in this book, and I can just pull some up, they're of people that, you know, that look like me, which is really, really important. And they're also photos of bodies that are just being bodies, you know. It's not about anything sexual or, you know, any crazy positions. Like, it's literally just about being in your body and the sensual experience of it. And so I'm really, really happy that I was able to create this book exactly the way that I wanted it, and that folks are going to be able to experience it in a way that is just so intentional. You know, like every part of this book was such a labor of love, and I put so much intention and thought into everything.
It really shows. I mean, I haven't even held the physical copy yet. It's really
Thank you. I'm really proud of it.
Could you tell us a little bit about like, how did you get the idea for this? Like, when did you know you wanted to write a book? How did you choose the topic?
You know, it's funny. I have always wanted to write a book. I was writing books when I was 7. We had this very clunky PC computer where I would type on Microsoft Word, and I would insert a floppy disk so that I could like save my progress. Like, I was very, very much into like, I'm going to be a novelist. And so I've always known that I wanted to write a book. I just, you know, it's about timing for me. And it just so happened that the timing was just really perfect when it happened. At the tail end of 2019 was when I really started to conceive this book. And it was really important to me for a book about sensuality to not have a lot of a lot of requirements for folks to like read about it. Like there's a couple of pages in here where I talk a little bit about my philosophy about sensuality, what I hope that they will explore within the pages, but the rest of it is just like lined pages with questions, prompts, and practices for me to help you experience and embody sensuality. Because I didn't want people to just sit and read about it and be like, okay, I'm going to intellectualize sensuality with my brain. I really wanted them to experience it through their bodies. And so it was also really important for me that this book was very exploratory, because so much of my work has been about asking questions, finding the answers within myself, not looking to an expert, but really seeing myself as the expert of my own experience. And so I'm really wanting for this book to give folks permission to access their own sensual wisdom, to trust that their bodies will show up for them in the ways that that they want their bodies to show up, and yeah, just to have fun with it, you know. So yeah, I'm very happy. It's still very surreal. We were saying before we got started today that like it's just now starting to land that I wrote a book, and you know, I've been doing this for almost 2 years now. So yeah, I'm so happy that folks will get a chance to read it and work through it.
Yes, I'm glad. As you called that out, I thought, oh, that is exactly it. That it's like I was going to ask you about the self-guided journal format. And
Yeah,
it is. I love that it's so like exploratory, and you don't have to, it was my impression, like you don't have to go in order. You can kind of
no,
states with me. You can just kind of flip through. I'm like, oh, this feels right today. And like,
yeah,
and like encompasses like different topics. I really like the format. It just like, it feels very free form, like
yes.
both the illustrations to the tones that you chose to the questions and the way you move through it. Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, that was really important to me. I really wanted folks to be able to explore sensuality without any obligation. So it is undated. Folks can just like pick up a page and like point and work on something. And then also, you know, I give them a lot of permission in here that says like, if you come across a prompt that just isn't resonating with you, or maybe you don't really want to do, like you can skip it, you know. Like I really want for people to sort of choose their own adventure while also having a really nice balance of challenging themselves to show up to some of these prompts that may be an edge for them, you know. Yeah, it's really great. I enjoyed every moment of constructing the prompts and practices for this book. It was such a writing a book about sensuality means that I have to be in my sensuality. So as I was writing the book, I'm like, Evian, have you drinking water today? What is your body doing? Like, do you need to move around and stretch? So it was so good for me to write this book, because I feel like it helped me deepen my own practice of sensuality and self-care.
Yeah, I'm sure. And that was actually going to be my next question was, you kind of in the introduction talk about using the book as part of like a ritual, and like how, and sensuality as a practice. And
Yes.
so just like, I'm curious, how important is a ritual for you? And what do you feel like are some of the benefits of establishing this like ritual or practice around anything, but specifically around sensuality?
Yeah, I mean, you know, in order for us to really begin to practice um, sensuality, not from, you know, a fleeting moment or an accidental experience, but more so on purpose, like we have to show up for it. We have to create a practice. We have to be dedicated to it. And I didn't want that practice or that ritual to feel like, oh, I have to do my sensuality today. You know, I wanted this book to be approachable and fun, and also inviting for them. So I really think that practices are so key, especially as we were talking about earlier. You know, we don't live in a world that is encouraging us to create practices like this. We don't live in a world that is telling us to slow down or telling us to put down our phone. If anything, we are being given messages more so now to stay connected, to continue to doom scroll, to be on our computers. And so it's so important that we carve out even just 5 minutes a day where we can put the screens down, we can take away the distractions, and be with ourselves. And that can be scary if you're not feeling like you are in a guided sort of space around it, And so I hope that this book is going to help folks feel a sense of like, okay, I'm not alone. Like I've got someone who's guiding me through this process. Because I found in my own personal experience that it can be difficult to create a practice and to stick with it, all on your own, especially with all the distractions and narratives and stories that we have in our head. And so books like these can be really helpful because it's literally a practice, a ritual in a book form. And you can work at it on your own pace. And you can even keep returning to these prompts even after you've done them, because I suspect that as we grow and as we move through the many transitions in our lives, like our sensualities are going to change, our bodies are going to change, the ways that we express our sensuality is going to change. And so I just hope that this is a living document for people, that they'll be able to explore their sensuality on their own terms and also feel a sense of like, it's an open, there's so much spaciousness for me to become who I want to become. And it's not just like, after I've written this prompt, it's done, signed, sealed, delivered, no more, like,
Yes.
let's keep coming to it, And what's cool about this too, is that like, it really is allowing you to have this practice of really being in your senses. And I've noticed that the more that we work at something, the more that we show up for something, and the more that we value a particular practice, the easier it becomes for us, something that someone said in a workshop that I taught recently was that, I ask folks like, how do you want sensuality to feel? And most often that question is like, I want it to feel natural. Like I don't have to think about it. I don't have to conjure it up. Like it's just a part of who I am. And so practices are what makes that that connection of consistency and continuity that can lend to sensuality not being a thing that you have to think about, but something that's like, oh, I'm feeling a little anxious right now. I know I have to breathe. Or my body is giving me a signal. I know I need to rest. Like the more that we do that, the easier it becomes.
Yes. And I both like completely agree with you that it is like a muscle, that like the more we work it, the more natural it becomes, the easier it becomes. But also what you're talking about feels to me like a return to like ancestral wisdom, like the idea that we even have to be like, am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Like the fact that people are so cut off from like when to eat, what should I eat? How should I move my body? And we rely on like diets and trainers, and we have to have somebody to tell us how to do everything because we're so disconnected from that ancestral wisdom, that way of living that was in connection with the earth, in connection with the seasons, in connection with our senses, our bodies. So I love this in that tradition of like returning to that like human essence that is getting just bulldozed by modern society. In my opinion.
No, I 100% agree with you. And actually there's a prompt in here that I wrote with the first manuscript, and I'm like, I don't know if this should stick. It's a little weird, but one prompt, and it's actually in the book, is like, what bodily functions do you hold back? Like maybe it's a burp or a fart, or maybe you're like, you don't allow yourself to pee when you really have to pee. Like really getting down to the basics of figuring out like, what are the parts of my body that I'm trying to control, or I feel like I'm not allowed to like allow my body to be a body. So much about this book is like, it's about encouraging us to take a very gentle and loving look at the relationship we have with our bodies, and to orient ourselves to being more in union with ourselves.
Yes, I love that. I just want to take a minute to remind everybody watching that if you have questions, please drop them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. We're going to save 10 minutes at the end to answer any questions that you have. So please don't forget about that. And this seems like a good place to segue into talking about the body. So I personally have been learning a lot about the wisdom of the body, about different ways to get in touch with our physical selves. And as someone who was cut off and even at war with my body for like decades, it feels to me like this creating a relationship with your body is the antidote to spending too much time online, even though I definitely do not have that mastered. I spend so much time online.
Neither do I.
It's my big challenge at the moment. I realize like, I think, and it relates back to what you were talking about earlier, that discomfort for me of sitting with my own thoughts sometimes, or like discomfort. It's so much easier to just it's so easy to just flip open your phone and then woof, like don't have to deal
There
with
are
those.
digital pacifiers. Like we're using our
Yes.
phone as like digital pacifiers that are soothing us, you know? Like one thing that I've been trying to track lately, and I'll be totally honest, I'm not good at this at all. And I'm okay with admitting that because like it's a practice, it's a journey. But one thing I've been noticing is like, when do I reach for my phone? Like what's happening in my mind? What's happening in my body when I'm reaching for my phone? Because typically we would think like, oh, it's just a gesture. It doesn't mean anything. You just reach for your phone. But like usually it's like I feel like I need to be soothed. I feel
Mhm.
lonely.
Mhm.
I feel uncomfortable with a, a period of silence that's happening in the room, or I feel bored.
Mhm.
And I mean, there are other things that I've been noticing too. And the trick with this is not to judge myself and be like, no, bad, don't pick up your phone, but more so like, that's interesting. Like, let's just track that and notice what's happening in that experience. And maybe try different techniques, you know. And sometimes I can get pretty good at it where I'm reaching for my phone. I'm like, oh, no, I don't need to go on Instagram again. Like, I need to drink some water, or I need to go
Mhm.
for a walk, or I need to read a book or something. I need to sit at my altar. Like I try to like give myself other options, not from a place of like, you're doing a bad thing, but like, that's not all there is. Like there are other ways that you can soothe yourself and feel a sense of belonging within yourself. But yeah, I feel you. It's really difficult to do. It's so difficult.
And I'm glad you call that like non-judgmental or non-critical, like just meeting yourself with compassion. Because
Yeah.
I want to get mad at, I get mad at myself. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe you just spent an hour on Instagram again.
Well, see, the thing, and this might not, I don't know, this might be a bad thing, but I'm going to say it anyway. I am trying to not shoulder the blame of these really bad habits that we have,
Yeah.
because these apps have been designed to take us out of our bodies.
Oh
Like
God.
they were not created to, I mean, they were created for community, of course, but like they're meant to be addictive, and they're meant for us to reach for constantly when we're bored or feeling insecure or feeling disconnected. So like I try to give myself a little slack, because it's not like I have a control over how this app or this particular function like email or something like that is like, it's literally designed for me to dissociate. And so I do the best I can in those moments to be like, okay, Evian, it's not that you're not strong enough. It's that like this thing was created for the exact purpose that you're using it. And so how can I just say like, that's interesting. That's a good thing for me to remember, so that I'm not going down this rabbit hole of shame and feeling really bad about myself, because like honestly it's out of my control in a lot of ways, you know.
I love that. It's such a good reminder that, yeah, like the apps are sticky as hell. Like they're,
Yes.
so yes, I'm going to like, after this call, I'm going to try to meet myself with a little bit more compassion about my app usage.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that that kind of goes back to the ritual or the practice, you know, like we can hold both of those things in each hand, you know. We can say like, yes, apps are addictive, and yes, it's like partially out of my control. And then also I get to choose how I want my days to go. And do I feel a sense of joy about scrolling on Instagram for 5 hours a day? Like really checking in with yourself. And if the answer is no, and I'm certain that it is, what sort of boundaries can you create, you know, that maybe don't have, you know, you on a brick Nokia phone, you know, but maybe it's just like, and something that I've been practicing is not keeping my phone in the bedroom. So when I go to bed, it is like in the living room, plugged in somewhere. I'm not scrolling on my phone at night. I'm not picking it up first thing in the morning. Like that to me, it's a small thing, but it's in service of my sensual self. And so I want us to all be thinking about just little tweaks that we can make. That's like, yes, we live in a frenetic world that is constantly giving us so much information and asking us to move fast. What are areas of my life that I can carve out small pockets of joy, small pockets of silence, small pockets of slowness, and do the best you can with that. I mean, those little moments, they add up to a lot. They really do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so much more. I think when we like, I'm not a fan of resolutions for exactly this reason, is that like it's the beginning
Yes.
of the year, people have these all these things I need to change about myself, big project, but we can't sustain that, which is another
Right.
reason that having a practice like working with your book or any kind of personal practice that's just like bite-sized chunks every day is so much more effective, I think.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I want to be respectful of your time, especially because I know you're doing a million events a week. You must be very tired. So um
Yeah, I'm okay. I mean, I one really beautiful thing about this work that I have fallen into is that it feeds me so much. Like every time I talk about sensuality, I learn something new about it. And so, yes, I am booked and busy right now, but also I'm using every opportunity that I can to learn a little bit more about something that feels really personal and important to me. So, yeah.
It's fantastic. Okay, I have one more question for you before I turn it over to people. And just a reminder, throw your questions, everybody watching in the Q&A. I see we've already got a few in there. My final question is that just to bring this all back to activism. So you've written a lot about the challenges of being queer, Black, non-binary person. And part of the reason I really wanted you to participate in this talk series is that I view you as someone who's really done a lot of work to move into deep self-acceptance and self-love.
Mm,
And my intention with this talk series, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, is to eliminate some ways people, especially marginalized folks, can use self-care, pleasure, rest, and sensuality to build more loving relationships with themselves and stand in their full power. So my final
mm.
question is, I'd love it if you could share any tips you have for people watching on how to move into greater self-acceptance and love, or share a little bit about your journey with that. Or if it's easier, what's one piece of advice you'd give your younger self?
Oh, wow. Wow, wow, wow. Such rich questions. Maybe I'll just share a little bit about what I think about self-acceptance. Something that I've been thinking about a lot as I continue to refine and come even more so home to myself and all of the multiple identities that I inhabit, is how like I have this one life to live. And it is imperative that I live it to the fullest. And it is also imperative that I live it with as much authenticity as possible. And I'm always questioning everything. I mean, I think it's very clear. I wrote a book that has lots of questions in it. Like, questions are a thing that I'm constantly engaging with. And so I want for people to think about the ways that maybe they have fallen into a sort of template about the ways that they think about their life or their gender, or the way that they're supposed to be in relationship with their sexuality or their body or marriage. Like, really think about all the systems and prerequisites that we've been given, and to ask yourself, like, does this fit me? Like, do I want to be living in this sort of paradigm? Are there any parts of my identity that feel boxed in by culture, by my upbringing, by the things that I'm supposed to do? And more so, not as a way to like, smash the patriarchy or become someone who's more radicalized, but more so to like dig in and figure out what is my authentic truth and who do I want to be? Like, who am I? Who do I want to become? And those are like the questions that have followed me throughout most of my life, just really wanting to come back to them. And every time I ask myself that question, the answer is different. It really depends on the day, and it depends on what I'm moving through at the time. And so I would encourage people, if they take nothing else from, this workshop tonight, that that they are allowed to ask questions. That is what it means to decolonize something, to like go against the grain of what we've been taught to do or to think or to feel or to occupy. Continue to ask those questions, not just as a way to come into your most authentic expression of who you are, but also as like an act of resistance to all of the systems, all of the oppressions that are telling you that you need to keep yourself small. And yeah, I feel very grateful that I really feel, we were talking about ancestors a lot, and my ancestors were top of mind as I was writing this book. And they're top of mind with me in general as I have an ancestral practice. And I'm so grateful for them because I know that I would not be here if it weren't for the ways that they might have had to dim their light or keep themselves small. And so something I think about a lot is not just like it's an imperative for me to authentically be myself, but like my ancestors didn't sacrifice, they didn't fight so hard for me to be small. Like it's I owe it to them to be the full expression of myself. So I'm not sure if that resonates with people. I know ancestral reverence or practices isn't for everyone, but if you can't do it for yourself, do it for your ancestors. That's what I'm trying to say.
I love it. Well, and I love that you call that out. I think that choice is so fundamental. Like this idea of like questioning and then like make your choice. Like you decide, like maybe you do want to move your body in a certain way, or you want to eat these certain kind of foods, or you want to have, but like choose it. Don't just let society tell you have to, like, this is the ideal body, this is the way you have to look, this is the way you have to eat, this is the way you have to work, this is who has value in our society. Like the idea that you get to choose, like that is freedom, that is liberation.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
Love it. Okay, let's go to our questions here quickly. So Anonymous asks, how do you think about the relationship between chronic illness and sensuality? I'm thinking especially about being present with physical discomfort and pain and the frustration I sometimes feel with my body for not functioning correctly.
I feel that comes up a lot in my work. And, you know, the one thing that I can say to that, I mean, there's so many things I want to say, but the one thing that's coming up for me that I think about a lot is our entire bodies, or do I want to ask this as a question? Is there a way, is there a space for you to feel into even the tiniest portion of your body that feels free or pleasurable? Even if it's your pinky, you know, like, is there a way that you can hold space for the ease, the relaxation, the groundedness in a part of your body that isn't experiencing pain or disconnection? Because I get that, you know, it's really difficult to be in your body and to practice sensuality if your body feels pained, if your body feels tense. And so I don't want to encourage people to ignore their bodies, because the practice of sensuality is about being connected and acknowledging our bodies. And I also don't want them to override it and be like, I'm feeling pain, but I shouldn't be feeling pain, so I'm going to try to feel something else. Like, what is it like to hold both in each hand? And that is a question that I can't answer, because like I don't know this person's experience of chronic pain. And so I would ask that they are curious about, like, how can I hold both in each hand? Like, how can I hold, yes, I have chronic illness or chronic pain, and also there is a part of my body where I can experience freedom. And there's a part of my body where I can experience pleasure, and to focus on the pleasure and the aliveness on that part of your body. Again, even if it's just your pinky, even if it's just your shoulder, like, can you place a hand there and feel the warmth of that and call that more so into your body, just as a way of honoring it, not as a way to try to change something or be something that you're not, but as a way to hold both in each hand.
Such a good question and such a good answer. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that was helpful.
Let's see. Hillary asks, has further tapping into your sensuality had any impact on your meditation practice?
Yes. I actually, you know, I am not a big meditator. It's very difficult for me to sit stagnant and just try not to think. So my meditation practice is actually sensuality. You know, it's actually like taking a task and trying to do it with all of my senses being fully awakened. So you can literally do this with anything: chopping vegetables, really focusing on, like, what does it sound like as the knife is hitting the cutting board? What does it look like as I'm chopping this carrot? I'm seeing such beautiful and brilliant colors. What does it feel like as I'm standing on the ground and I can feel my feet being supported by the ground beneath me? Like, that to me is like an active sort of meditation where my body is being engaged, and I'm also in conversation with my body and feeling into the sensation and the messages that are coming from my body. And that has deeply made my meditation so much better, because, when I first got into meditation, people are just like, oh yeah, you just sit there in silence and you try not to think. And I'm like, are you guys not anxious? Like, I don't know. I'm an anxious person. So it was just so foreign to me. So now that I see sensuality as a practice of mindfulness, and that mindfulness can be a meditation, I've been having a lot of fun exploring like just how deep I can go with that. And yeah, Hillary says moving meditation. One of my favorite things to do is sensual dance meditations, which is basically what I just said, but while you're dancing, while you're moving your body, and that's another really beautiful way of meditating for me.
I love that. And I'm gonna keep that in mind, because I personally have been struggling with meditation lately. I find myself just not wanting to do it, like the further we are in pandemic life. So I'm gonna use that.
Yes, try sensual dance meditation. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, final question. Has paying more attention to your own sensuality changed how you view or communicate with others at all?
Yes, it has. I'm thinking about how, as I've said before, in order for us to be fully into our sensual bodies, we have to slow down. And oftentimes, when we're in relationship with people, things can move really fast, and it's very easy to not be present to the person that you're speaking to, or that you're in space with, or even just the world around you. And so sensuality for me has allowed me to also slow down when I'm in the presence of somebody else. It's also had me discern a little bit. For the longest time, I considered myself a highly sensitive person. And I think that is sort of true, but I'm also realizing that sensitivity might have just been me being a chronic caretaker with really bad boundaries. Mm-hmm. And so sensuality has been a really great practice for me to discern my energy, my emotions from other people's, really holding firm and staying grounded in who I am and what's coming up for me, and not trying to enmesh myself into other people. And again, that takes a lot of practice. I'm definitely not good at it, but it's been interesting to see how different I am in relationships and dynamics with folks. When I'm a whole individual, I have my own feelings, emotions, bodily sensations, and I'm going to do the best I can to stay very anchored in the truth of who I am, even if there's a hurricane going around me. And again, that takes a lot of practice, but it's something that I've been trying to do.
Yes. How differently do we show up from a sense of wholeness when we feel like we don't need that validation? We don't need to people please. We just, I am a whole being. I'm here showing up as myself. Yes, of course.
Right.
Our interactions. Okay, before we wrap up, can you tell people where they can find you, where they can buy your book, all the I've just been dropping links, but tell us again.
Yes, sure. You can find me on my website, evionwhitney.com. That's where you can find everything you want to know about me, the work that I do, how I got into this work. You can find me on Instagram at evion.whitney. I have a podcast called Sensual Self. It's the same title as my book. Previously, it was called The Sexually Liberated Woman, but after coming out as non-binary, I was like, woman doesn't really resonate with me. So it is now called Sensual Self. You can listen to that wherever you find podcasts. And I love my podcast so much. We talk a lot about what we've been talking about today, which is coming into the body, what it looks like to have a practice of slowness and pleasure. So you can check that out. And then my book, Sensual Self, you can find that wherever books are sold. I want to encourage folks to go to independent bookstores before they go to these big corporations. And you can find that anywhere.
Yes. And I think we have a link over here to the side for Third Place, which is a really fantastic local bookstore. So yes, everybody head out and buy this book. It really is fantastic. I can't wait to get my copy. Evion, thank you so much for being in conversation with me. This was really fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation, and I wish you all a really great evening, and best of luck on your sensual journeys.
I'll turn it back over to Stasha.
Thank you both so much. What a wonderful conversation. And I felt I was nodding along over here, to basically everything that you were saying. We do have a question from Zelda asking if it's possible to share the chat information in an upcoming email. So Olaya, is that something that you do with your newsletter? If I provided you the chat, could we make that happen, do you think? Or
yes,
figure something out?
Oh yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to be, so as all of these chats are posted to the library's YouTube, I am sharing them with my list, and I'm also going to put a highlight up on Instagram.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great. So I'll make sure that Elia gets the chat, and that we also will add the resources. We usually post the resources that are talked about during the talk on the YouTube channel as well, just so that that's another place that you can access that. But I'm so grateful to both of you tonight for this wonderful talk. It was just such a great way to close out the series, and as I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in watching those other speakers in the series, you can find some of them posted on SPL's YouTube channel, and I posted a link to that in the chat. And as Olaya mentioned, she'll also be helping spread the word on that. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, we're interested in hearing from you. So I'm going to post a link in the chat here now. It's a program survey, and we'd appreciate it if you took a minute after the event to fill it out. We'd love to hear what you think. I really do read them all, and it does help shape the programming. So we're grateful for your feedback and appreciate the time. I'm also grateful to everybody who made tonight's program possible. Thank you so much to our program partners, Third Place Books. Thanks to our sponsors, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation, the Seattle Times, and the Seattle Public Library Foundation. And of course, thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. We are so grateful for you to be here. And let's give Elia one big last round of applause for an amazing series and closing out the year. And thanks, everybody. And we will see you in the new year. Good night.
Good night.